when people hear my story or when I talk about it, it seems like it was such a smooth, sort of easy thing that everything worked out so perfectly and so beautifully, and it did. But there was so much that happened along the way that people didn't see. And I think it's important for entrepreneurs to learn about that, to know that it's normal to have shit go down, like that stuff's gonna happen and it's not gonna be good.
This is your second act, where the plot twists back. You've been there, done that, now you're building for the love. The stack, oh yeah, laughing at the highs and the lows you track. Welcome to your second act.
Jamie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jared. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you. I have this funny little story, which is when you and I were talking about doing this podcast focused on the second act, I was familiar with Schmidt Naturals, which is the company that you founded, but I knew it more from marketing. I have a marketing background, so it's like, oh, this cool packaging and everything. And I tell my wife, I'm like, oh, I'm going to be interviewing Jaime Schmidt from Schmidt Naturals. And she opens up her cabinet and has the actual product there. And so I asked her, I said, well, how did you find this? What was the deal? And it's interesting how much people care about the, deodorants and lotions and stuff that they put into their or onto their body. So right away, Christina, my wife, could rattle out a bunch of things. She's like, well, I didn't really want to have the aluminum in it. And I tried this one that was in a jar once, and it wasn't actually yours that was in the jar, but tried one at a farmer's market that was like that.
Yeah.
It was too hard to apply, and I really liked the application. And I was shocked at the thought process that people will go into when choosing a deodorant.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I
it was
love
really,
it.
really cool little moment.
That's why I started it, because I cared about those same things.
Well, yeah, so let's start there.
Yeah.
I want you to tell the story from your view, but I know that you were looking to solve really a problem for yourself around finding a natural deodorant product. But walk me through a moment of inspiration.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it started kind of selfishly. I was just, on the quest for a deodorant that worked, that was clean and that smelled good. I was pregnant at the time. This was, back in 2010. So new mom, with different priorities, looking more closely at product labels, being more conscious of the foods I was eating. And deodorant was one of those that, some people might not take very seriously. It sounds like, your wife is one of those that cares. And I was, in that same boat, kind of for the first time ever, really just being really, really conscious of everything I'm ingesting, because I was a paranoid, newly pregnant woman. And nothing seemed to be working in terms of natural. This was very early on the scene, 2010. We had a couple brands to choose from. And those choices just felt very limited and ineffective for me. And I think it was a shared frustration at the time, just from conversations I was having with friends and people at farmers markets. So I started to make my own. I just did a little research on what would help with body odor and wetness and be the cleanest, safest option, and threw some things together on the kitchen stove. And next thing you know, I have a deodorant in a jar. I, at that point, did not have a stick. That was very daunting. The idea of formulating something in a stick, just was a whole other challenge, which came later. So I took my jars to the farmers markets and realized there were more people that needed this. And, they worked so well for me. And so I thought, let's get this out there into a bigger community. And it took off. People were really interested. And it was pretty amazing to see that something that I just, an idea I came up with on a whim for my own personal use, became popular so quickly with the local Portland community.
Yeah. And so what even goes into a deodorant? So are you making this literally in a pot, or how does this come together?
Yeah, and this was before AI and ChatGPT, right? I couldn't just log on and say, tell me how to make a deodorant. So there's some deeper research that went into it, and formulating, and so much trial and error. But the base at the time was baking soda, which is known for absorbing odors. We use that in our refrigerators and other things to help keep them odor free. And then for the texture, needed something kind of creamy and nourishing to the skin. So I was using shea butter, coconut butter, some coconut oils, and then started incorporating arrowroot powder, which is also known to help with wetness. So the trick was really getting the right formulation, the right ratios of ingredients,
Oh,
and then knowing which temperatures to melt things at and to mix things at. And that was all just trial and error, like handwritten notes. I didn't have a sophisticated system really. It was literally paper, like with a pen, writing down, what's working, what's not, what do I need to tweak. And all these papers are stained in oils and grease, and it worked for me. I didn't have anybody to answer to except myself at the time, and a few customers. So I had that luxury of just trying everything to see, what landed.
yeah. It's almost like you're making food, right?
No,
Like,
yeah, for sure.
you're using your kitchen, you're using ingredients from your fridge and from different places.
Yeah,
What about I know that you mentioned scent was really important, like
yeah,
what the scents were. How did you get started with that? Or what did you decide on
right.
was going to be your first scent or your favorite one?
Yeah, that was the fun part. I love fragrance. I like, perfumes and essential oils and flowers and just anything, that smells good. But I like natural smelling things. I don't like the synthetics, which were pretty prominent in the deodorant space. So I just bought a bunch of essential oils. But keep in mind, it was on a budget for sure. So when I say I bought a bunch of, I mean, that was an investment for me. Like I couldn't, and they're not cheap. So I bought the ones I thought smelled interesting and started mixing different combinations of fragrances. And again, a lot of balance there, trial and error. But I love woodsy scents. I love florals. I like fresh smelling things. That certainly became, I think, the funnest part of building a product based company. It was just like putting your own personal preferences into the product, things that you think are good, generally resonate with at least one or two other people, right? But it's a risk because just because you think something's great and fantastic doesn't mean that other people are going to too. So it is pretty cool when you see people responding to things and saying, "Wow, I love this. This is amazing."
Yeah, because it's subjective, right? Like what I
Right.
great scent might be different than somebody else. And the budget side is interesting because you weren't this it wasn't like, hey, I'm going to do a startup and I'm going to raise money and I'll invest this in.
Right.
You're literally making like, hey, I'd like to have a natural deodorant. I'll make it myself. If I went and bought this at the store, it's going to be $6. So my budget is $6. Like your budget wasn't $500 to do it for yourself.
Right. And it was all just personal money. Like I didn't have a business bank account at the time.
Right.
In fact, it took a little too long for me, I think, to set that up. And that's one piece of advice I always give on new entrepreneurs is keep the business and the personal expenses
Yeah.
separate from the beginning because it becomes so much easier to reconcile. And, the books become more important as you scale. And so that got a little messy for a while.
Yeah. At what point do you go from your kitchen to even a farmer's market? Because there's a certain amount of, personal, reputation risk almost by going to a farmer's market and putting a
Sure.
product that you made and getting this feedback right away. Like at what
Yeah.
point did you decide, okay, this is ready to go outside of the house?
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I didn't have a whole lot to risk. No one really knew who I was. Portland's kind of a forgiving community. It's just a culture of people who are trying things and expressing themselves, artistically in different ways. So I feel like the environment there was perfect for me. But it was scary. I had no experience in sales. I didn't have any, background in science or chemistry to go out and talk the talk of like, why this is the best formulation. It was just like, hey, this deodorant's really great. You should try it. But people, they were into it, and there were definitely some skeptics, especially because the deodorant was in a jar, and that's not something that you see all the time. And so you have to apply it with your fingers, right? So it's a little different from just, your classic deodorant stick. So that was another hurdle, I think, was just to get people to take it seriously. But then once you start seeing the feedback or hearing the feedback and seeing people excited about it and coming back, week after week to see what's new, that's when you realize, okay, I'm kind of onto something here.
Yeah. And so that initial feedback from those farmers markets, did you make a lot of changes to the product over that time? And if
Yeah,
so, what was
absolutely. I took everybody's feedback so seriously, which was great in the beginning, but that becomes overwhelming and sort of impossible, right? Because everybody has their own opinions on texture and scent and things. And so while I wanted to please people and to incorporate, my customers as much as I could, you have to draw the line somewhere and say, okay, where am I seeing patterns of feedback, right? Is there a consistent thing that I'm hearing all the time? And also just trusting your gut and making decisions that might not please every single person.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine someone's like, I don't like the, whatever this first scent.
Yeah.
I prefer
And
this.
once I started sharing my phone number, like once I was in retail, I was be on the phone with people forever
Yeah.
talking about deodorant and their armpits. because I just wanted everyone to be happy. And so people have a history of like, serious issues with deodorants, or maybe they had bad skin reactions, and or they, whatever it might be. There's just armpits are serious business. So
Right.
people want to talk about it. And so I would take time out of my schedule and just go all in with customers and be on the phone forever. So again, like once you realize you have to draw the line somewhere and you start hiring customer support people and things, but yeah.
I can imagine you're the only person that they knew that they could talk about their armpits and like their body. Or
Yeah. Oh
okay,
yeah.
well,
I became like therapist slash doctor, slash, all the things.
yeah. And at what point did you find that this might be a business? So you start out, you're like, I've got a problem.
Yeah.
And you probably solved your own problem relatively early. Like you built a
Yeah.
product and that solved the problem. At what point did you decide this is either a business or, hey, I'm going to solve this problem for all these other people as well?
Yeah. I had people at my booth at the farmers markets asking what stores they could find the product in. And that's when I realized maybe this could be something that sits on store shelves, and maybe there are more people that, that need this product. And so I started taking it pretty seriously and realized that there was big potential. So I started pitching some of the smaller local retailers. I was doing consignment, which you lend your product to the stores. You don't get paid until it actually sells, so it's less risk for these smaller independent retailers. And then once I started getting momentum there, I started setting up wholesale accounts with some of the bigger stores. I sort of started with the smallest stores possible that just felt safe for both of us, and then kind of began to build from there. And I went natural retail or food co-ops next, and then natural retail chains like Whole Foods, and then from there started getting into like more of the mainstream grocery, and then eventually we're talking like Target, Costco, and then Walmart. So all just sort of built up over time. But I also had online retail. My sales on my website started to grow pretty significantly with more marketing and things, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah. Well, we are going to get into kind of what you're doing now and how you're using this. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, did you have anyone that was helping you through all of these steps? Like what template or blueprint are you following as you go from
Yeah.
farmers market to a co-op to a Walmart, like, and changing the formulation? Who guides?
Right. I didn't have any mentors. I didn't read a whole lot of books then, which inspired me later on to write my own books so people had something. But it was a lot of intuition and going slowly. I didn't look too far ahead. I did not have big plans for selling the business, which I think helped with the way that I grew it. I just sort of took one step at a time and really only looked, a few months into the future and thought, all right, what's my next goal here? And then I bootstrapped the business, so I didn't fundraise. I didn't have advice from investors, which also means I didn't have pressure from investors, which was kind of nice. And just went from there. And then eventually I started hiring people, and my husband came on a few years in to help with the marketing, and he has a good brain for that, so that was useful, and that helped propel us into the next phase of the business, and ended up making some strategic hires. But my earliest hires were like friends, friends of friends, and people that were probably a little underqualified, but just eager to help. So they, grew alongside with me, and but I did not have a big team of like, C-suite level employees. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at what point do you feel like this moves like well outside of the kitchen and is now a product? Because I imagine being in a farmer's market where you're the one that is the person and the product versus getting into a Target.
Yeah.
Like that's got to be a completely different business that you're running.
Yeah, it is. That's when you start hiring brokers and reps and people to have those conversations with the retailers. I did all of that directly for a long time, and then there's some retailers that won't even really talk to the founder unless you're going through like a broker. So finding those connections, it wasn't easy, but I did some trade shows and things, and that helped me make those connections. And but you have to convince them that you're worth working with. Each store has different expectations, so you might have a meeting with Target, where you have to go in with a certain strategy around pricing and what SKUs or products you want to sell in those stores versus other stores. And then some of them get, competitive, and you only sell in their stores versus, so there's just so much strategy and a lot of thought that goes into each and every one of these wholesale accounts.
And looking back, it's like, oh, this went perfectly. I moved from this step to this step to this step.
I don't know about perfectly.
Still it's a Unilever. In retrospect, it
Yeah.
looked like this master plan thing. Were there moments along the journey where you just wanted to give up? Like, this is a
Yes.
crazy idea. Why
Oh
was
yeah.
I doing this? Like, talk
I
about
thought I
those.
was crazy for a while. Yeah, because well, I think the biggest part was like who did I think I was creating something without this background in chemistry or science or in this tiny little kitchen in Portland, Oregon, where I'm up like competing against Unilevers and Procter and Gamble's who have these sophisticated labs and scientists on staff. And so the fact that I was taking sales from them was just blowing my mind. And there were days where I thought I was losing it. And there was just so many challenges I came up with supply chains and building my own factory, right? Because I made everything in house. I did not use co-packers until the very end. So that in itself was a huge challenge, trying to hire people to make deodorant, teaching them, the ways and trying to figure out the right equipment. And that was such a challenge in itself because our formula was different from the more traditional deodorants. It was a thicker, waxier consistency. And so I was stumping the equipment manufacturers who weren't able, to create what I needed, and just got crazy. And trying to keep up with the demand when you're dealing with all those challenges is really hard.
Yeah. And you're building this all from the first time. This is the first time
Right.
created a CPG brand.
Yeah.
How does Unilever become interested in this? Like, what was that time frame like?
I started opening my mind to the idea of investment and or potential acquisition once we had gotten wholesale accounts like Costco, Walmart, because it was just things were getting out of control. I had inventory or all my money tied up on inventory and store shelves, and thought, all right, I need to do something here. And so we got Goldman Sachs on board to help broker the deal. They started putting out feelers to see who might be interested. And there was another big deodorant brand at the time also going through the same acquisition process. So that helped bring a little bit of awareness to the category. And then we just started having conversations, doing the due diligence, negotiating, and it all happened pretty quickly, actually. But so much work went into that, and a lot of scary moments of like, okay, we're this far in, but it may not happen. And it was wild.
Yeah, I sold my company through an acquisition, and I remember the time it was right around the holidays.
Mine was too. Yeah.
And you have like the good thing is you have all this time because it's the holidays, right?
Yeah.
But you're in your, like in my case, I'm in my basement on my laptop like 10 hours a day, just going through Excel spreadsheets and old contracts and everything,
Yes.
and just trying to get upstairs and have like some family moments over the holidays at the same time, right? It's
Yeah.
super intense. Mine was a 3-month process,
Okay.
probably one of the most intense 3 months. And the biggest
Yeah.
thing that I found was it was really tough to keep the business going that I was selling while
Yeah.
selling the business, because so much of my own time and the team's time were like taught up. So when you say the deal might fall through, you're like pot committed, like for a poker term, like you're in this deal and you're dedicating so much of your time. You kind of need this to move ahead because you've been so distracted. That was my case
Right.
too.
No, that's so true. Absolutely. And then for the sake of the business to survive, right? Because you've sort of just rethought the future of the business and what it needs. And then if everything had fallen apart, it was like kind of starting over again and think, okay, we have to like really figure out how we're going to continue to scale and sustain this demand. But it's wild. The acquisition, I mean, they ask for so much too for the diligence, as you're probably
Yeah.
aware. And you're just, I mean, if you're not organized, you're kind of screwed. There are some things I don't have that, and I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do, right? So that's another thing. I guess takeaway for entrepreneurs too is, if there's just keeping everything organized, and not, you don't have to be thinking about selling the business, but it's just, there's going to be a time when someone needs something, keeping your contracts all, in tip top shape, and negotiating contracts too, and not getting locked into the thing like 3-5 year contracts, because that's not good, right? When you do sell the business, they don't want to be tied into these contracts with outside agencies and just, yeah, right? I mean, keeping it all
There's a big
intact.
difference between building a company and building a company to sell is one.
Right.
And like if I was to build a company to sell, which wasn't necessarily what I was doing, man, would I have stuff nailed down. I would have brought in an accountant way earlier than I did,
Same.
right? Rather than trying to do my own like QuickBooks where I don't have that background, but you just do what you got to do while you're
Yeah.
flying the
I think
plane.
about how much cleaner it would be if I did it now, but then at the same time, I feel like it would just been such a different journey
Yeah.
that it might not have ended the same way, right? Like it just, I don't know. The more you know, like the harder it becomes in some way. Naivety is a blessing when
Yeah.
you're sometimes, right? Yeah.
Well, so you sell the company. That was in what year was that?
2017.
Yeah. And how long do you stay on board? What does that look like after? What's the feeling that you
Hmm.
have? There's a day where
Yeah.
the transfer happens, right? And you hit refresh on the bank account type moment, and that's where things
Oh
are
my God.
are real. What does that exact moment feel like? Because this I've found is different for every founder. Like
Yeah.
the actual emotional feeling when it's not yours anymore. You've been essentially like paid for that
Mhm.
work. What did that feel like?
Well, it was really hard for me to know what capacity I wanted to continue on in, and I had a lot of control over that, and it was not easy. Because for sometimes I would think, all right, I want to stay on an operational capacity and keep working hard. Other times I wanted to, cut back maybe 50%, and then there were times I wanted to sort of just be done for a while and still stay connected on a more of a ambassador type, basis. And I ended up going with that latter option of like still staying on with the brand, but not operationally. I felt like the company was in great hands with Unilever and all the talent they had there and all the connections and things. And so I stayed on as a spokesperson for a few years. And yeah, the emotional part of it, it's very hard to describe. I knew I would miss the day to day just craziness, the chaos, but also like such a relief to not have to worry about some things. And yeah, and there's this element of sadness and loss, I suppose, but also just big pride, right? Like, and just amazement at what, I was capable of. And realizing too that I was now in a position where I could help other people and be an inspiration and through my story and all my experience, which I didn't realize until after when people started to come to me and ask questions. And then I thought, oh, I guess I learned quite a few things.
Yeah.
And I have some things like, stuff to teach. And even today, it's been almost 10 years now, 9 years. And people still come to me for advice. And that's pretty cool. And it's fun to tap back into the journey and, to be able to help people along all the different phases of the
Yeah.
process.
You, Steve, probably don't realize that you were one of the first people that helped create this natural category. And if you look back, a lot of these like Unilever and Procter Gamble, they acquired a lot in a similar template now to what they did with Schmidt's Naturals. Like
Yeah,
happening more and more often now. But you were one of the early ones in this
that's
space.
true. Yeah.
Like,
Because
broke down.
they could have tried to create the product themselves, right? Or buy a brand like Schmidts, and they didn't have the time, probably the patience, or the genuine sort of love for to create something like that I had, and so I think that made sense for them to buy. And I had that community that was so engaged and so is such a loyal, part of the brand, all my customers, and I think they would just wanted that. And they knew they couldn't recreate that in the lab. So that, yeah, it's cool to look back on it. And then natural deodorant in general just blew up after that. So many brands. And it's wild now, so many. And even as like, as I was building, I would see a lot of them coming up. You go on Etsy and there's all these. I was on Etsy for a while too, and
Yeah.
it was a big step in my business. It was fun selling there, but it's overwhelming though. It was overwhelming, scary as more and more brands kept coming up. I thought, oh gosh, I got to stay ahead somehow. And I think the way I did that was by realizing that it wasn't just natural deodorant; it was a deodorant that could compete, with the conventional brands and not necessarily just a natural play.
Right.
And
Like
so
a
my
word.
goal became not just to compete with like Tom's and Maine, but to compete with like Axe and Dove and Secret and to be people's first natural deodorant without even knowing it's natural sometimes, right?
Yeah.
For certain customers.
Well, I think a
Yeah.
huge sign of your achievement of that goal is that the company that you're competing against acquires you because they maybe weren't able to create that
Yeah.
internally. There's something also really interesting in your case where your name is attached to
Right.
forever, right? So
Yeah.
in that decision making, like you must have thought about that a few times, like if they mess this thing up, like my name
Yeah, that was weird.
is sick.
I had mixed feelings because I liked it because it secured my legacy, right? Having
Yeah,
my name on there. But
yeah.
like you say, yeah, it was also sort of uncomfortable. Like, okay, well, let's hope this goes well.
This is
Yeah. But
how
it's fun
like
when I go into stores now and I
yeah.
see it on the shelves. It's just such a cool feeling still. You go into Whole Foods and there's just so many SKUs and I always take a picture and it's just,
Yeah.
yeah.
I am sure that you get people sending you pictures too, because even
Yeah,
I was walking through the grocery store a couple weeks ago and I saw, and I was going to take a picture and just send it to you.
you
And I'm
should
like,
have.
how many of these photos does she get,
That
right?
never gets old. I like to get those pictures.
That's cool. Well,
Yeah.
so let's talk about, so that acquisition happens. You then, move on from the Unilever business over the period of time.
Hmm.
And this show is called Second Act for a reason, which is
Right.
like, what do people do, especially in your case where you have this great successful exit? A lot of people would like spin up another one, right? Because,
Hmm.
hey, now I learned this is going to be way easier the second
Yeah.
time. What was the thought process for you on what do you deem as your second act?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I wanted to do was just reflect on the whole journey and help people. Like, I really like early stage entrepreneurs because that was the part of the business that was just so exciting to me. It was just the potential and all the unknowns. And so I was pretty eager to respond to people who were reaching out, but then realized like it was a lot, and I couldn't keep up with everyone. And so I thought, how can I reach the most people? So I decided to write the book. It's called Supermaker, which is kind of a fun spin-off maker. I started in the maker community, but became what I deem a super maker, crafting business on your own terms. And so the idea there is that there really is no playbook, right? There's no formula. But I could help people through just sharing my experiences and the lessons that I learned along the way. So it's part memoir, part like instructional takeaways about every step of the way. It was super fun to write because I was able to go back through all the old emails and everything starting in 2010 and just relive it and put it all out there and then to reflect on what I learned and what people could take away from it. And so I would consider that book a success. People loved it. They're still reading it, still enjoying it. And I think it's helped a lot of businesses and a lot of founders.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. And so I've had people ask all the time, "Are you going to start another CPG company?" And my first thought is I could never recreate that experience. It was such a unique way that it transpired, and grew. So if I did, it couldn't ever be as special as that was. And so we also started an investment fund, my husband and I, another way to reach more brands. And it was interesting though, because I didn't take on any funding. So to then start a fund myself was a surprising step for me, but it made sense. I thought, all right, I'm going to help people, first of all, decide if they need funding. 'Cause there were so many people who reached out and said, for investment, and I said, maybe you don't need it. Like, let's rethink this. And, maybe capital is not the answer for you right now. And then just plugging in, from the operator perspective and not just providing capital, but actually experience and insight that was super valuable for a lot of founders. And that fund has evolved. We started out with early stage entrepreneurs in CPG, but as our interests have evolved, and as the economy sort of shifts and things change, and we've kind of expanded our thesis there. And so we're looking at like some tech plays. We are also heavily invested in pro pickleball because we both play on a personal level and love the sport, and it's growing so quickly. So it's fun. It's fun to have a fund where we don't have other people to answer to. It's just the two of us, so we can make all these decisions. And yeah.
And it's not like you have to rebrand yourself, but you wrote a book.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you're going to be an author and you're going to write books? Like, tell me about that experience of sharing all this knowledge. We'll link to the book actually in the show notes if people want to pick it up. But I'd love to know first, like, what are a couple pieces of wisdom that you felt like it was worthwhile for you to get this out in a book format so it could reach lots of people? Like, what are the lessons you really learned without giving away the whole book?
Okay. I think one is just sometimes when people hear my story or when I talk about it, it seems like it was such a smooth, sort of easy thing that everything worked out so perfectly and so beautifully, and it did. But there was so much that happened along the way that people didn't see. And I think it's important for entrepreneurs to learn about that, to know that it's normal to have shit go down, like that stuff's gonna happen and it's not gonna be good. And so I think that's probably the most important part of the book. I think also the personal transformation that comes with being an entrepreneur is one that you don't think about maybe as you're building, but when you reflect back and realize how vulnerable you have to be and how much as a person you change, willingly or not. And I think that's important for entrepreneurs to realize too. Yeah, and again, just like not pushing it on people that this is the answer, this is how you do it, this is step 1, 2, 3. It's more, this is your story, this is your journey, and this is sort of a framework for, how to maybe expect things to go, but staying flexible.
Yeah, I think people that are in it, let's say they're building their first business, they run into all of these bottlenecks and frustrations, and times they're going to give up. And they probably look at other people that have been successful and they're like,
Yeah.
why did they have these problems along the way?
Yes.
Like, obviously, I'm doing something wrong. And my own experience was the same too. There was a point where we had to like lay off a bunch of the staff on the team. I remember the day. It was like the middle of summer, and me and my business partner, like, we're going to have to do this. Probably one of the worst moments of my life, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's
you
so
feel this
hard. Yeah.
failure, right? You feel this like moment of failure and like, did I give up a real job to go do this thing?
Yeah.
Like, who gives me the right to be able to go out and do this? So,
Yeah. Well, then also everyone's livelihood is depending on you. That
yeah,
works for you, right? That's tough. It's because it's not just your success, it's other people's careers and their lives, and that's just like that's a lot to carry.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
when you do these investments in the kind of this next stage or this,
Hmm.
you've shared a lot of your wisdom through the book. You're also sharing your wisdom through these investments. Tell me what you look for in
Yeah.
an entrepreneur now that you're putting your money where your mouth is and saying,
Yeah.
like, hey, I believe in this person. What do you look for?
Yeah. It depends. For CPG companies, I like the idea of a product that can start niche but then grow to reach the masses. So similar to Schmidts, right? We were really after like that natural consumer, but then ultimately wanted the product to reach everybody. And so I think that's sort of it's a nice path, I think, for consumer products companies, is to start, because you can't please everybody in the beginning. You have to have, hone in on a niche and really nail that and then expand from there. So that's important. Others, you just taking a bet a lot of the times. And truly, like, the founder has a big role in it. Just talking to somebody, you just know, right? You can tell. And which is crazy, because if someone had talked to me when I was building my business, especially in the beginning, I don't know what they would have thought about me. Like, who the hell is this woman? But when I'm talking to founders, like, I don't know. I want like a certain sort of energy. So I suppose I had that energy,
Yeah.
but I just never thought of myself as like, that serious businesswoman that's like going to land an investment.
Yeah.
I guess there's a lot of vibes there, a
Yeah.
lot of vibes involved. It's wild. It's hard to articulate, as an investor. And then there's the diligence you go through and the projections and all the, like all the technical scientific, philosophy behind like what makes a good investment. And we have a team that helps with that and everything. But
And what
yeah,
do you find? Have there been portfolio companies that you can share the story of where you're just like, this is it. This is the kind
yeah,
of thing the reason I invest is because, hey,
right.
like, kind of,
One success story of ours was Hero Cosmetics. They're a pimple patch company.
yeah,
And she took it all the way and sold it. I was actually a mentor to Ju, the founder. Early on, we did this thing through Inc. magazine where they partnered the mentors with founders, and I was her mentor through through a pretty critical stage of her business. So that was cool to be involved. That was before we invested, and so yeah, that was a great product. And then again, you could see that a lot of other companies were coming up doing similar products to hers. So she got in early enough. And then we just had a nice return on our pro pickleball investment, which was pretty shocking so early to see that. And that was a riskier one. That was one where we were sort of in it for the long haul and didn't know what would happen. It was more kind of a passion play also. So that was pretty cool. So
yeah.
there's others. We have a great portfolio. I love all our companies. It's fun to get their updates, and everybody's at different stages, and some need us more than others, on a regular basis for advice and things. But it's great.
Yeah, I'm curious. Do you feel like this, let's call it your second act, which is
Hmm.
sharing all of your learnings and your journey and then taking some of these resources that you've been able to accumulate and then like applying them to other founders? Do you see that being your next 30 years, or is there like a third act that you're thinking of down the road?
Yeah, I think there'll be more. I've done other things too since the acquisition. So my husband and I also started a media company called Supermaker, same name as the book, more specifically targeted to founders building during COVID. And that was an awesome resource for a lot of people, because COVID was a wild time, and being an entrepreneur in general, just, is hard. And so we were there to help provide some insights and support and featuring founders on our website and through socials and things. That was fun. And we had a grant program there where we awarded a few different founders cash for because we believed in their business. It wasn't an investment; it was just a grant. So things like that will show up for us, as we go. I also built a community that helped educate women on crypto. That was when NFTs and crypto were all a thing and the rage, and everybody, we needed people to know what was happening. And my co-founder Britt Morin and I saw an opportunity to help women just figure it out. Wow. So that was a cool journey. We ended up that company got acquired by Boss Beauty, so I won't go too deep. That's a whole episode in itself.
Yeah.
But that was another thing I've been involved in. And then now, still investing, that won't stop. But I'm also really focused on myself and my wellness, and that for the first time ever. I'm 48 years old, and I'm finally in a position where I'm taking my health, more seriously, and started strength training, which is important for women as we get older, and getting a lot more deep into that than I anticipated. So I have to, see where that takes me. It's really, really fun.
You have a company that's focused on, naturals and natural ingredients, but at the same time, your stress level's probably
Yeah.
at 11, right? You're not probably taking care of yourself during that. And yet the mission of the company is kind of almost adverse to what you're doing just because you're just in it, right?
That's
So
so true.
maybe you
Yeah.
finally have the time to focus on
Right.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's true.
I definitely see this theme of, helping and sharing and educating people through everything that you're saying, whether it's crypto or pickleball or investing in
Yeah,
CBD, right? If
that's
you
true.
were to think of what you would share with all these founders out there that are just, and not even necessarily founders, but just everyone, a lot of people would love to start a company.
Yeah,
They're just scared to start,
right.
right? What do you say to that person that's working in a job that maybe they don't love or finds a problem they'd like to
Hmm.
solve? But what do you say to those kind of people? I'm sure they ask you about this all the time
Yeah.
in real life.
I mean, well, one thing is time is gonna pass anyway. People say, oh, I don't want to do it, it's gonna take too long. Time's passing anyway, so why don't we work towards something during that time? And you can go at your own pace. You don't have to fully jump in. If you're working and the idea of just quitting and starting is scary, which as it should be, build slowly. Do, have some little side projects while you're starting. I did that. I don't talk about that a lot, but in the first several years, I mean, I was working part-time jobs. I tried to work jobs that were somewhat relevant to the business. So, for example, I was working at this company that made these DIY kits for different products and things. So, similar to building my own products. So I was kind of learning the steps of that. I got a peek into the wholesale retail world. I did part-time hours at a small little store just so I could see how stores worked, how they bought products and things. And just so if you can find work that is relevant, that's valuable. Or stay with your current job and just maybe cut back your hours a little bit. But I think people think it's this sort of all or nothing approach, and it doesn't have to be. And, don't obsess over competition. I think it's smart to be aware of what's out there, know where you fit in, what makes your idea unique, but don't obsess and constantly compare because you can get caught up on just obsessing over other founders and brands and saying, I can never compete with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine a category more challenging than getting into CPG,
Yeah.
where you're launching something like a deodorant that you could walk into that store that day and see that the shelf space is already all taken and they're by
Yeah.
enormous companies. So I think this idea of your journey, you just kind of figure it out as you go. There's going to be messy times.
Yeah.
It might take a while, right? But the journey
Yeah.
is probably more important than actually the outcome at the end of it, because you've talked about how it made you a different person through that journey,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's an exceptional thing for people to take away, is that even if you're deciding to start something off of the side of your desk or a passion project that you do on the weekends,
Hmm.
regardless of the outcome, the journey that you take over that time is probably the most valuable thing that you get. You're probably a different person today than you were that day that you started that, pregnant in your
Yeah, for
kitchen,
sure.
because of this journey that you took through Schmidt
Yeah.
Naturals.
I think it's also important is this idea of work-life balance is great, and balance in general is wonderful, but it's also not always realistic. as a founder. There are going to be times when you're so off balance, and you just have to embrace that, and just know that, and ultimately things will settle, but there will be weeks or months or years where you're just grinding so hard, and then maybe, alternate times where you can take a breath and focus more on other parts of your life or whatever. But realistically, that things are going to be chaotic. It's just, the willingness to accept that.
Yeah. And just to close this out, if I were to talk to you in, let's say, 10, 20 years, what is your view of like who Jaime is at that point and like what you're feeling at that time?
Okay, 10, 20 years. I will be ripped because
Yeah.
I'll still be working out. Hopefully I'll be looking pretty jacked. I will be still investing, and assume, some of the companies in my portfolio will still be in business, I assume, and hopefully supporting them through whatever, successful outcome is. Yeah, well, whatever else comes up, things are going to come up for me that I would never guess.
Right.
And I think that's what's been so cool over but the last, 9, 10 years is that I never had anticipated some of these things that, that I'm doing now, and just keeping an open mind.
Yeah.
I'll always be open to opportunities and ideas, and I feel very young. I feel like there's, a lot ahead of me. Of course, it's nice not to have the pressure to build something that's going to have a big, financial outcome, and I have more flexibility there, which is great. We'll see.
Well, from a Portland kitchen through to, thousands of stores selling your product with your name on it, an exit at Unilever, investing in companies, having a professional pickleball team. I mean, feels like the journey is just continuing for you, and I'm excited to see and hear where it goes.
Thank you. Me too.
Thanks, Jaime.
Thanks.
Curtain up, coffee cup, signed the deal, packed it up, big exit, big grin, but the story's just beginning now. Boardroom ghosts fade away, new whiteboard, new first day. What if joy was the metric on the page right now? You got time in the tank, you got scars in the bank, all that pressure you carry, you can flip it, flip it. This is your second act, where the plot twists back. You've been there, done that, now you're building for the love.